When I inherited my grandfather's 750-acre ranch, I thought I'd finally found my own slice of heaven. The land stretched endlessly, rolling fields, tall grasses waving in the breeze, mighty oaks casting cool shadows, and a sky so vast it made every problem seem small. 4 generations, this land had been in my family, passed down like a sacred treasure. I had looked forward to hard work, peace, maybe some solitude. But what I didn't see coming was Sunrise Hills HOA and its president, Karen Ventnor. It started just a week after I moved in. I'd been out checking the eastern fence line, making sure the property was still secure, when she appeared out of nowhere. She came marching up in a pastel blouse, clipboard in hand, her face tight with a kind of judgment that made my stomach tighten. She was smiling, too brightly, and her eyes were sharp, watching everything I did. "Good afternoon," she chirped, voice way too cheerful, as if she was greeting a long-lost friend. She had a tight, professional look, perfectly pressed blouse, neat hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Karen Ventnor, president of the Sunrise Hills HOA. We're so happy to have you next door." She extended her hand, and I shook it, trying to keep my tone polite. I nodded politely. "Thanks, just settling in." She launched right into her spiel, her voice rising in that overly chipper tone, rattling off words I barely caught. Community standards, aesthetics, shared spaces, neighborhood harmony. It was like listening to a pre-recorded speech, each word carefully crafted to sound friendly but heavy with expectations. Then she dropped the bomb. "We'd love for you to join the HOA," she said, handing me a thick packet of papers. "It's just a formality. Your pasture would be perfect for community events, seasonal festivals, charity runs, and so on. It's important for all of us to contribute to the community spirit. We'd be delighted if you signed these papers today." I blinked. My family's ranch, standing alone for nearly a century and a half, was now supposed to be some kind of shared recreational space. My land, my privacy. I looked at her, stunned. "Sorry. This is private land. Always has been, always will be." Her smile tightened, but her tone stayed sweet. "Oh well, you'll change your mind. Everyone does eventually." I handed her back the papers, feeling a flicker of unease. "No, I don't think so. This is private property. I don't intend to sign anything that says otherwise." Her smile faded just a little, but she kept her composure. "Well, we'll see," she said, voice clipped. "We're here to help you see the bigger picture." Over the following days, I realized just how serious she was. The pressure began to mount. Friendly letters arrived in the mailbox. "Welcome to the neighborhood," reminders about HOA dues, invitations to neighborhood picnics. Flyers taped to my gate. "Join us for the summer community picnic." And strangers wandering onto my land, acting like they belonged there. I politely asked them to leave, but they kept coming. Sometimes, I'd find a group of teenagers racing dirt bikes across my pasture, claiming Mrs. Ventnor had told them it was okay because it's basically part of the neighborhood now. I was stunned. Had she really authorized that? Then came the surveyors. Without warning, they appeared with their equipment, hammering stakes into the ground in my western fields. When I demanded to know what they were doing, they nervously mumbled about mapping out a new trail route for a charity run. When I pressed them, they pointed east towards Sunrise Hills. That night, sitting on my porch under the wide, starry sky, I finally understood what was happening. Karen didn't just want access. She wanted control, and she wasn't going to stop until she had it. I was stubborn. I wasn't going to be pushed around. I told myself I'd stand my ground, tell her no, and everything would blow over. But I knew I was underestimating her. I didn't realize just how far she was willing to go. The very next morning, I found a bright orange notice taped to my mailbox. "Failure to maintain acceptable landscaping. Violation notice." I laughed. The violation. A patch of native prairie grass that had been growing wild since Teddy Roosevelt was president. I had to laugh even harder. My land, my pasture, deemed non-compliant by a bunch of HOA busybodies. One afternoon, I was watering my cattle when I saw her again, walking across my property with that same fake friendly smile. But this time, she was flanked by a group of people holding clipboards, official-looking types, probably from the HOA compliance committee. They walked in a straight line, inspecting everything, writing notes. I walked over, demanding they leave. They looked startled, then awkward, as if caught trespassing. That was just the beginning. Next, she organized a community walk, an event designed to encourage neighborly interaction and respect shared spaces. I watched in disbelief as they gathered, smiling and chatting. And then, guess what? They marched right across my fields, taking selfies, oohing and eyeing at the natural beauty they wanted to preserve. Karen led the charge, waving at me like she owned the place. When I confronted her, she smiled falsely and said, "Michael, we're just enjoying the community's beautiful landscape. It's for the children, for everyone." I told her flat out, "Get off my land. This is private property." She just laughed, dismissive. "Oh, don't be so possessive. It's all part of the neighborhood now." I felt my blood boil. I told her again, "You trespassing. This land is not yours or theirs. Leave." She turned her fake neighborly tone even higher. "Relax, Michael. We're just trying to bring everyone together." Then, without warning, she whipped out her phone and dialed 911, loudly claiming I was threatening families and causing trouble. I watched as she spun her lies, describing me as dangerous, hostile, aggressive. Her group gathered around her, clutching their drinks, acting like I was some kind of menace. I stood there, calm but seething. I knew I'd had enough. I was about to be pushed to the edge. The sheriff's cruisers appeared in record time, kicking up dust as they rolled down the Date Road. Karen's face lit up like she'd just won the lottery. She ran toward the patrol cars, waving her arms wildly, shrieking for help. The deputies stepped out, taking in the scene. Tents, fires, people milling about, all on my property. The younger deputy, a guy named Collins, looked at me, then at her, and his face betrayed a mix of skepticism and amusement. I handed over my land deeds, ready for them to see the truth. Collins thumbed through my papers, nodding slowly. Meanwhile, Karen was doing her best to look innocent, but I could see the desperation in her eyes. "Sir," Collins said, "do you want to press charges?" Without hesitation, I said, "Yes, I do." That was the moment everything changed. Karen's face drained of color, then turned bright red. She shrieked, "You can't do this to me. I'm the HOA president. I'm respected. I'm important." The deputies, trying to keep a straight face, gently guided her toward the cruiser. Her shrieks grew muffled, but her voice echoed with fury. "You'll regret this," she yelled. "I'll have your badges. I'll sue the county. I'll call the mayor." As the cruiser's door shut and she disappeared into the night, I stood back, watching. The chaos was over for now, but I knew this wasn't the end. I went straight to my lawyer the next day. We drafted a lawsuit, trespassing, reckless endangerment, false police report. We named Karen personally and took the HOA to court as well. We had evidence, photos, videos, land records that made their lies look pathetic. In court, Karen looked desperate. She tried her best to spin her story, but her words fell flat. Under cross-examination, she admitted she'd never asked permission for her community events, never checked any official land maps, and had encouraged people to treat my pasture like a neighborhood park. The judge, a crusty old Texan, listened quietly, then leaned forward and said, "Being jealous of your neighbor's grass doesn't make a legal argument." The verdict was swift. Karen was found guilty on all counts. She was fined heavily, ordered to pay damages, and slapped with a lifetime ban from my land. The fallout was even more satisfying. Karen, once the self-proclaimed queen of Sunrise Hills, became a social pariah overnight. Her HOA collapsed, replaced by a new board that understood property rights. She sold her house at a loss, moved far away, and took a job at some chain store, taking orders instead of giving them. And me? I took one final step. I hired a local artist, a grizzled old cowboy with a wicked sense of humor, to craft a monument. It was a tall, gleaming steel sign, crowned with a rearing horse, with bold words, Hail Ranch, private property since 1873. Community events invitation only. Karen Ventnor, lifetime ban. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, Respect boundaries or meet the fence. That Saturday morning, I planted the sign at the border between my land and Sunrise Hills. I threw a big barbecue, an open invitation for neighbors, but not for Karen. The smell of slow-cooked brisket, the sound of country music, and the laughter of friends filled the air. Kids ran around, pretending to be cowboys. The mayor of the local town even showed up, smiling and shaking my hand. As the sun set, I climbed onto the tailgate of my truck, holding a cold beer. I raised it high and said, Here's to good neighbors and better fences. The crowd cheered, and the night echoed with laughter and music. Looking out over the fields, the same field my grandfather had ridden across, I felt a deep sense of pride. This land, my legacy, was safe. No HOA, no Karen Ventnor, was ever going to take it from me. I'd fought for it, and I'd won. And from somewhere far away, I imagined her, fuming and fist-shaking from a tiny apartment or chain store. Maybe she was plotting her next community project, or maybe she was just angry at the universe. I didn't care. All I knew was, I was home, and nothing was going to change that. As the last embers of the barbecue flickered out and the crowd drifted away, I stood alone in the quiet darkness, staring at the towering sign I'd just planted. The words respect boundaries or meet the fence glinted in the moonlight, a stark reminder of what I'd fought for. I took a long breath, feeling the weight of it all, the years of hard work, the legacy of my family, the invasion of my land by people who thought they owned it. But I wasn't done yet. Not quite. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose sharper than ever. I knew Karen wasn't finished. She'd never give up without a fight, and I had to be ready. I called my lawyer and laid out the next steps, filing proper legal notices, preparing for the inevitable court battles. I also knew I needed to tighten my fences and reinforce the boundaries that had been so blatantly disrespected. Because if she thought this was just a game, she'd soon learn she'd mess with the wrong man. I decided to pay her a visit, not to negotiate, but to see her face when she realized I wasn't backing down. I drove down the dusty road towards Sunrise Hills, my mind racing through plans, defenses, and what I'd say when I finally confronted her directly. As I approached the subdivision, I saw them, her people, walking along the sidewalks, tending to their yards, acting like they owned the whole world. I slowed my truck, watching from a distance. There she was, Karen, standing in her front yard, watering her flowers, her face bright and innocent looking, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. That fake sweetness was just a mask. Beneath it, she was calculating, waiting for her next move. I didn't get out of the truck. Instead, I rolled down the window and called out, loud enough for her to hear, Karen, we need to talk. She looked up, startled for a moment, then composed herself quickly. Michael, she said with a forced smile, walking toward the truck. What a surprise. I thought you'd be busy working on your fences. I kept my gaze steady. I am, but I think you and I need to have a real conversation. About the land. About respect. She chuckled softly, tilting her head. Respect? You mean like you respecting the community's rules? Or are you talking about something else? I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. Karen, I've had enough of your games. You've overstepped, more than once. You're not just trying to get access to my land. You're trying to take control of it, and I'm not going to let you. Her smile faded just a little. Michael, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to help the community. We're all working together, aren't we? No, we're not, I said firmly. You're trying to push me around, and I won't stand for it. This land has been in my family since 1873. It's not yours to take or control, and I've got lawyers working on the paperwork to prove it. Her eyes flickered with something dangerous. You think you can threaten me, just because you have some fancy deeds? I took a step closer. Karen, I'm not threatening. I'm telling you the truth, and I suggest you start respecting my boundaries, or I'll make sure you regret crossing them. She looked at me for a long moment, then gave that fake smile again, this time a little colder. "Fine, Michael. We'll see about that." As she turned and walked back toward her yard, I knew I'd just made her mad. Good. That was exactly what I wanted. I got back into my truck and headed home, knowing this was just the beginning. She'd be furious, and I'd be ready. Later that day, I met with my lawyer. We went over every document, every land survey, every paper trail I had. I wanted to be prepared, because I knew she'd try to push harder, maybe even send her people again. And I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. Not this time. I also reached out to some local neighbors I trusted, people who knew my family, who understood the history of this land. I told them what was happening, and surprisingly, many of them shared stories of Karen's overreach, of her trying to control everything in her neighborhood. They promised to support me, to stand guard if needed. The next few days brought more trouble. Flyers appeared taped to my fences, announcements for neighborhood events on my property, even claims that my land was public space for community use. I found strangers wandering onto the ranch, acting like they belonged there. I politely asked them to leave, but some ignored me, brushing it off as if I didn't matter. That's when I realized Karen's influence was spreading faster than I'd expected. One evening, I caught a group of teenagers racing dirt bikes across my pasture again. I approached them calmly, asking them to leave. They claimed Mrs. Ventnor had said it was okay because it's part of the neighborhood now. I felt a mix of shock and anger. They didn't even seem to understand how serious this was. But the final straw came when I found survey stakes hammered into my western fields. Without permission. When I demanded to know who authorized it, they pointed east towards Sunrise Hills. That night, sitting on my porch, I stared up at the stars and realized she was trying to turn my land into a shared space, a playground for her community, whether I liked it or not. And she was willing to go to any lengths to do it. I knew I had to act fast. I called my lawyer again, briefing him on everything I'd seen. We prepared papers for a formal injunction, a legal warning to stop any further trespassing or encroachment. I also decided to make it clear that I wasn't going to back down anymore. That very night, I posted a big private property sign at the entrance of my ranch, right where she and her people had crossed the line. I wanted everyone to see that this land was off limits. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. Not with Karen. The next morning, I received a call from the sheriff's office. Apparently, someone had reported a disturbance on my land. When the deputies arrived, they found her group, and their equipment scattered across the pasture, acting like they owned the place. Karen immediately started her act, claiming I was threatening her, causing trouble, and refusing to cooperate. I stood back and let the deputies do their job. I handed over my documents, showing proof of ownership, the land deeds, and the previous surveys. The deputies looked them over while she launched into her spiel about how I was harassing the community. The older deputy, a grizzled man named Sam, finally spoke. "This is private property. Always has been. And you're trespassing. If you want to hold events here, you need permission and permits. Otherwise, you're on your own." Karen's face paled. She tried to argue, but the deputy cut her off. "You're causing ecological damage by setting up fires, disturbing wildlife, and ignoring property rights. That's illegal." She looked like she'd been slapped. "I'm the HOA president," she declared weakly. "Being HOA president doesn't give you the right to break the law," Sam said coldly. "And I suggest you leave before we have to take further action." She finally backed down, grumbling under her breath, and was driven away in the cruiser. As the dust settled, I looked over my land and knew this was just the beginning. Karen wouldn't stop, but I had the law and my resolve on my side. I was ready, and I wasn't going to let her take my land, my legacy, without a fight. The sheriff's cruiser disappeared down the road, kicking up dust, and silence fell over the ranch. I stared at the sign I'd just put up, "Respect boundaries or meet the fence," a clear message to anyone thinking of crossing my line again. But I knew this was just the start. Karen wasn't done, and I wasn't naive enough to believe she'd simply pack up and leave. That night, I stayed awake, plotting my next move. I'd won this round, but the war wasn't over. I decided to tighten security, fencing, cameras, and maybe even hiring a few ranch hands to patrol. I needed to make it clear, this land was mine, and I wasn't going down without a fight. Morning came fast. I called in a land surveyor to mark the true boundaries of my property, making sure every inch was clear and protected. I also drafted legal notices, ready to serve her with official warnings. My lawyer was on standby, and I knew I had to be prepared for her next move. Despite the tension, I couldn't ignore the fact that I had neighbors, some supportive, others quietly watching. I reached out to a few trusted friends, sharing what was happening. Surprisingly, many had stories of Karen's overreach in their own neighborhoods. That gave me some strength. I wasn't alone in this battle. Just as I was about to start reinforcing my fences, I spotted her again, this time in her driveway, watching. Her expression was unreadable, but I caught the flicker of a smile. She knew I was ready, and she didn't like it. She stepped inside, but I knew she was already planning her next move. A few days later, I received a package, an official-looking letter from her attorney. It was a cease and desist order, claiming I'd been trespassing on public land and demanding I remove any barriers I'd put up. I chuckled. She was trying to spin the truth, but I had my evidence. I called my lawyer, and we prepared our response. Meanwhile, strange things started happening. My fences were tampered with, gates left open, and I found more flyers taped to my fences, announcing neighborhood events on my property, inviting everyone to join in. It was clear she was trying to claim my land in the court of public opinion, turning neighbors against me. One afternoon, I caught her in her yard again, pretending to be friendly. "Michael," she said, voice syrupy, "I think we can work this out. Maybe you're just being a little too sensitive." I looked her straight in the eye. "Karen, this isn't about sensitivity. It's about respect. Respect my land, respect the law, and respect my family's legacy." She blinked, surprised at my directness, then forced a smile. "Of course, Michael. I just want what's best for the neighborhood." I didn't buy it. I knew her game. She was trying to wear me down, to make me doubt myself. But I'd been through worse. I nodded and said, "Good, because I'm not backing down." That night, I stayed up again, watching the fences, listening for any unusual sounds. I was ready for whatever came next. This land was my home, and I was prepared to defend it, by any means necessary. The night passed quietly, but I knew better than to let my guard down. Dawn broke sharp and cold, casting long shadows over the ranch. I moved quickly, inspecting the fences where I'd noticed more tampering. Every post was reinforced, every gate secured. Karen's tactic was clear. Try to wear me down, chip away at my resolve. But I'd learned long ago that resilience is built in the quiet moments, not just in the loud ones. I met with my lawyer that morning, going over the latest developments, preparing for the inevitable court date. The evidence was on my side. Photos, surveys, witness statements. Still, I knew Karen wouldn't give up easily. She had a way of twisting words, of turning conflicts into public dramas. That's why I had to stay one step ahead. While I was busy, I got a call from old Mr. Jenkins, the neighbor who'd helped me since I was a boy. "Michael," he said gruffly, "I've seen her folks messing around near the creek again. They up to something." Without hesitation, I grabbed my binoculars and headed toward the creek, knowing that whatever she was planning, I had to see it first. As I reached the spot, I saw her crew, some young men with trucks and equipment, digging around the edge of the property. I stayed hidden behind a cluster of trees, watching. They were trying to set up some kind of structure, maybe a makeshift access point or a hidden trail. Whatever it was, I knew it was illegal, and I wasn't going to let her expand her reach on my land. Pulling out my phone, I snapped some photos for evidence. I also called the sheriff again, reporting the trespassing and illegal construction. When the deputies arrived, she was caught red-handed, arguing with them, pretending she had every right. But the law was clear. No one could just build on my land without permission. Karen's eyes flashed with anger when she saw the officers. "This is harassment," she spat, trying to intimidate her way out of it. But the deputies weren't buying her act. They issued a formal stop work order, warning her to cease all unauthorized construction immediately. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery reds and oranges. I felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination. She was pushing, yes, but I had the law and truth on my side. I knew she'd escalate her tactics, maybe even try to enlist more neighbors or stir up trouble. But I was ready. I pulled out the land deeds again, studying every detail, making sure everything was in order. My family had fought for this land for generations. It wasn't just dirt and trees. It was our history, our legacy, and I wasn't going to let her erase it. Just then, I spotted movement down the road, a group of her supporters approaching, some waving signs, others shouting. I tightened my grip on the porch railing. It was clear, the battle for this land was far from over, but I was prepared to stand firm, to defend what was mine, no matter what it took. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. I went straight to the barn to check on the animals, ensuring they were safe and secure. The quiet of the morning was a stark contrast to the chaos of the day before. As I moved through the familiar scent of hay and leather, I reminded myself why I fought so hard. This land wasn't just property, it was part of my soul. Later, I met with a trusted friend, Sarah, who had been involved in local land disputes before. "You're doing the right thing, Michael," she said softly. "Karen's not just after your land. She's trying to scare you off, to make you give up. But you've got integrity, and you've got the truth on your side. Keep steady." That day, I decided to take more proactive measures. I ordered new security cameras, aiming to catch any further trespassing or illegal activities. I also contacted a surveyor to do a detailed boundary check, just to be sure there were no surprises hidden in the land's lines. The last thing I needed was her sneaking around, trying to claim more ground. As the afternoon wore on, I noticed her again, this time at a distance, watching from her driveway with a notebook in hand. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes betrayed her frustration. I knew she was planning her next move. I felt a flicker of anger, but I kept my composure. I knew I had to stay calm, strategic, and unwavering. Later that evening, I sat on the porch once more, feeling the cool breeze against my face. I poured myself a glass of homemade lemonade and stared out at the vast land I'd fought to preserve. It was a peaceful scene, trees swaying, the distant call of a coyote, the crickets humming. But beneath that calm exterior, I knew the storm wasn't over. Karen was relentless, and she wouldn't stop until she believed she'd won. Just as I was about to head inside, I saw headlights approaching down the dirt road. My stomach clenched. More visitors? I tensed, preparing for whatever was coming next. This land had tested my patience before, and I knew it would again. But I was ready. No matter the challenge, I'd defend my home, my legacy, to the very end.